Hi, everyone. I'm James Protin. I'd like to give a special thank you to our sponsors for the podcast. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the podcast. We're back in the friendly confines of the City of Monessen at His Place Coffee Community and more, where it all started, Nick. This is where it began. The first, I don't know how many shows we did here before we started to branch out. It's great to be back. These people were wonderful. They're always really, really good to us. Our guest today is maybe not the most interesting guy in the world, but the most interesting guy in the Mon Valley right now. It's Ron Mozer, the mayor of the City of Monessen, where we're sitting. Mayor Mozer, welcome. Welcome to the podcast.
Well, thank you for having me.
It's good to have you. I've been wanting to sit down and have a conversation with you for some time now. We have been watching Monessen closely. Those of us that are born and raised here. I grew up in Charleroi across the river. And, you know, we kind of are all in the same boat here in the Mon Valley, right? And, you know, it has never been here, at least, that the old John F. Kennedy quote, right? A rising tide raises all ships. We haven't experienced that here because we've had these silos. And you have found a way to kind of break through that and kind of take a lead as far as the communities in the valley.
Well, thank you. I guess, it kind of all starts with the way that I was raised. I grew up in Alamogordo, New Mexico, a very small town in southern New Mexico. But as I went through school, I went to Las Cruces, worked in engineering. I eventually went to work for a company called El Paso Natural Gas, which was at the time a very large company. We automated, we did a small project to put automation along the pipeline, and it failed miserably, to be real honest with you. One of the other engineers and myself approached the executives of the company, and they put us into the basement of the compound. There's two 18-story buildings in downtown El Paso. We're in the basement. And they said, you have 1 month to show us what you can do.
Really?
Give us an alternative. Well, we spent a month, and we perhaps took a little longer because they didn't have time to come down and see us. But eventually, we gave a presentation to one of the executives of a device that we had built that would measure gas. And the executive was quite impressed. He says, oh, I got to show this to my other executives. And next thing you know, we're showing it to all the different vice presidents. And now we've got a whole floor of accountants and business development people that are assigned to us to develop a process to take this and build something for the company. Well, it was very interesting. This over the course of a couple of months, this transpired. And the next thing you know, we have a business plan that is quite elaborate, quite well done. And it was Christmas Eve. The president of the United States, president of El Paso Natural Gas, called me into the office, myself and the other engineer. And he looked at this report and he says, this is very interesting. I have a business group that says this is a thing to do. This is something we can do, and so forth and so on. But he says it's not gas business. I only understand gas. And he says, I can't do it.
Okay.
That was devastating.
Yeah,
I wanted to
absolutely.
jump off the top of an 18-story building. It was devastating. But I blended into the framework of the company. I changed departments. I went into a group that was obscured. But nonetheless, a couple years later, the director of the department I was in comes up to me and says, one of the executives wants to see you. And he calls me in and says, I don't know who you are or what you did, but you attracted the attention of one of the executives. He wants to put you in charge of a division in northern New Mexico for doing automation. And it was described to me as a process of, we have an aging workforce. The workforce, they needed to train new people or find ways to automate and to solve the problem. So we took he told me I could do anything we wanted. And
Okay.
I said,
That's nice.
rather than going back down the course of building our own device, we said, let's give this to another company and let them build the device.
Okay.
So we gave it to another company. I took a workforce of about 2,000 people, sent them to a class that we defined at the local university where they had a 5-day class. They'd come in, learn to use voltmeters, they'd learn to use computers, they'd be given things, and then they would be introduced to this device. It was rather interesting, but it was something I learned from immensely. Of all the people that we trained, there was only a couple people that saw nothing good in what we were doing. It turned out that they were illiterate and they really understood that they were never going to be able to exist with computers.
Okay.
So
And what year was this?
this was in about the year 97.
Okay. Okay.
So this turned out to be a $20 million project through the year 2000. In 2000, we had successfully automated some 7,000 gas wells. And they said, what do you want to do now? You can do anything you want to do within the company. And I said, release me, believe it or not. They did, but they gave me a contract to continue to support them for going forward. So they gave me some starting capital. So I continued to automate gas wells in the Four Corners area of New Mexico.
Okay.
Eventually did all those wells, and due to other things that were going on in the state, I decided to move to Pueblo, Colorado, where I'd be more centrally located, access to airlines. I could travel.
Okay. Sure.
So I spent 2 years working in the basement, designing a device that would gather data from a gas well, transmit it via satellite back to a central computer, and you could log on and see what your gas well is doing from anywhere.
Sure.
So in the course of this, I started selling a couple devices out to the Appalachian region, because at the time, cell phones were not well established, towers didn't exist, and
Still
so
a new
forth.
thing, right?
So I started selling to Chesapeake, which was doing a lot of business in West Virginia,
Right.
Tennessee, and that whole area there, Kentucky. And it attracted the attention of a company called Equipment and Controls. Equipment and Controls has offices in Charleston, which I thought that's where they were going to do. They ended up buying me. They wanted to buy the company, learn the technology, and manufacture and sell these devices on their own.
Okay.
So it's a 4-year program. We thought we were going to Charleston, but no, we're going to Pennsylvania. And then I thought it was going to be Canonsburg, because that's where their home office was. And they said, actually, when we were on the trip, they said, you go to Monessen. Where's Monessen? Well, I show up in Monessen, and I start doing this project, trying to train their people how to do these things, manufacture them, and so forth.
Okay.
After about 3 years, it became obvious that they weren't going to pay me, that I hadn't got my first payment, hadn't got my first thing. It just wasn't going the way that they had promised.
Okay.
I asked for and received the intellectual property. By this time, they had taken all my assets, but I got the intellectual property back. And here I opened up an office here in Monessen, because that's where I bought a home.
Okay. Okay.
Well, what's going on in Monessen? It looks like it's an old steel town, and nothing new's happening. I conducted a survey. I go to all the merchants along Donner Schoonmaker, and I presented them with a survey.
And this is as a private citizen.
This is a private citizen,
Right.
just
You took it
because,
upon yourself to do this.
because I was seriously concerned about what was going on in
to
Monessen.
learn about your community, your new community that you're making your home.
So in the course of getting all this data, they really came back with a whole bunch of things. First off, I was suggesting, well, we're building a new bridge to Charleroi. Is that going to improve things? I understand ArcelorMittal is going to take off again. Is that going to improve things? And everybody just kept shaking their head. That's not going to fix the problems of Monessen.
Okay.
And it really boiled down to, top of the list was a couple of things: Blythe and drugs and crime.
Okay.
Well, Blythe, that seems easy enough. First, being naive, perhaps, I started picking up trash along Tyrol, and every weekend I'd go out there and I'd fill up a pickup truck just overflowing with garbage, and just it'd come back every week. And I was coming back from Bell Vernon one day, and there's a car in front of me, and the windows rolled down, kids in the back seat, and they're throwing garbage out the window. I followed that car till it stopped up at City Park. And being a rather good-sized guy, I was cautious. I walked up to him and I said, this is disheartening to see you throwing trash out after I've been spending all my weekends cleaning it up.
Really?
And after they denied it a few times, they finally admitted that, yeah, they'd been throwing trash out, but that they would come help me pick up trash the next weekend.
Really? Now there you go. And now see, that was bold to do that, to just, come up and talk to a stranger and call them out like that. That's a bold move.
But do you really expect them to show back up?
Probably not. You would think that just by human nature that they would say, oh yeah, I'd love to help you, and then go, I'm never going to see this guy again. I'm gone.
And that was the approach that I really assumed, that they would never see him again. But they did show up.
Really? There you go.
They spent all day working and picking up trash. I bought T-shirts for them, and I said, taking the mess out of Monessen. I bought them ice cream at the end of the day. The one thing that came of that, I bet you they don't throw trash out the window anymore.
That's very true.
They
That's
understood something.
Yeah.
But it occurs to me that that's not what people were complaining about, though, is when they're talking about Blythe. Blythe is a much bigger issue than trash on the side of the road.
Yes.
So I said, wow, maybe this is more than I can really take on based upon the fact that I've spent all summer long working on this little aspect and was not making headway.
Right.
I walked in the police station. I said, I want to talk to the chief. And took a little while before they let me get in to see him. But I went in and I said, I've conducted this survey. Everybody says drugs and crime are a big problem. What can I do to help? He said, say that again, please. I said, well, I put together a survey, walked the streets, compiled all the results. Drugs and crime are a big problem. What can I do to help? And he looked at me and he said something in pretty explicit terms like, I don't believe you. You know, people come in here and tell me what to do or ask me questions about why I didn't do something. But nobody has ever come in here and says, what can I do to help?
What can I do to help? Yeah.
So I left. A couple weeks, a couple of days actually later, he calls me up and he says, I did a background check on you. Will you come back and talk to me again? So I go back and I say, where is the worst problem you have in town? He gives me an address. It happened to be 10th and Knox. I go up there with my son-in-law. There's a guy standing on the corner. He's dealing drugs. There's a line of cars that McDonald's would be proud to have as a drive-through business. There's a house next to the bar that's blighted, that has windows busted and door wide open and electric meter on the side, and it's just spinning like a top. I looked at my son-in-law and I said, you know, they're cooking something in this basement. I'm not totally naive.
Sure.
About that time, I look behind me, there's lots of people standing there. It's time to get out of there. I go back to the police station. I say, that's an eye-opener. That's just craziness up there, what I saw. Is the bar part of the problem or part of the solution? The chief goes over and pulls out a letter from his file cabinet that was written by the trustees of the Black Elks Club, the Improved 11 Order of Elks.
Okay.
And this letter basically was requesting that the police provide 24/7 support up there because there had been 7 shootings outside that bar the previous year.
Wow.
So I called up the trustees and I said, let me treat you to lunch. And I invited them all to my office. I had it catered by a local restaurant. Okay. I had the police and myself there, and they come in, they sit down, and I'm suggesting several things, you know, like maybe you raise the minimum age. Maybe you do searches and so forth. And they kept shaking their head and saying, this isn't our problem. This isn't the problem of the patrons. This is a problem of the neighborhood.
Okay.
I thought about it a little bit and I said, well, let's try something. If I can build devices that bring data in from gas wells via satellite, surely I can figure out a video camera that would get video to the police station. So we ended up putting some cameras around the bar there.
Okay.
And it's interesting because first thing that happened is the guy's not out dealing drugs anymore. There's kids playing in the playground for the first time in many years. The police aren't getting phone calls constantly from the neighbors saying, what's going on with open air drug dealing? The police looked at this and said, wow, we need more of this stuff. Okay. So we started putting it up around town at the police's direction where they wanted it and so forth. Next thing that happens is we get a phone call from Charlie. What are you guys doing over there? You're sending everybody over here. Come help us out too. So we started putting cameras up in Charleroi. The next thing was Denora. And
I was involved with the Charleroi process because my wife and I bought a camera because they went out to the community, and I think that they raised enough for a couple of hundred cameras.
Exactly.
It was a lot.
It was a lot.
And I remember at they had a recognition at one of their council meetings. Okay, you were there, and they offered to them. They had all the people in who had, you know, the general public, but people who had donated. And they said, if anybody wants to see, you know, a demonstration, we'll go downstairs to the police station and they'll show you. So we went downstairs and their computer screens and we were standing looking, and they were giving us a demonstration, and a couple of the council people were standing next to me, and the police officer said, look, and he said, I'll be right back, because it was the one that was on top of the Borough building, and it was pointing straight down to the parking lot by Subway there. And right there, while we were watching it, there was a drug deal happening. He walked across the parking lot and arrested the guy. I mean, the first night when they announced this, it paid dividends, right? And I think that in all of these communities, those cameras have made a world of difference. At least they have made people think. They've made some people feel more comfortable and more safe, and they've made some others think twice about what they were doing.
Exactly. Well, things proceeded. So here I am in Monessen,
Okay.
brought here by the mysteries of life, I guess, is lack of better ways to say it.
Yeah, and you were
But-
brought here by a business deal that never really happened.
That never really happened. But nonetheless, I eventually decided that I'm going to run for mayor.
Okay.
And as such, there are several things that I really have subscribed to. That first off, I start every session with a prayer. That
Okay.
really changes the very attitude of what goes on in a city council. And the reason why I do this is because when I started looking at Monessen and trying to really evaluate what's going on, I started to understand a lot about the history of Monessen and what goes on. But it's not entirely unique. You have communities all up and down the Mon River that have suffered in a similar way.
Right.
And in fact, you go from Brownsville to Rincon. You have, Brownsville, Charleroi, Donora, Monessen, and just keep
Right.
on going up the thing. Every one of them has their own unique problems.
Sure.
And it's rather interesting because I've been doing video cameras. I started paying attention to these communities. And it occurred to me, well, okay, there's maybe two that are not so desperate as the rest. California, but they have the university there. And the university provides a lot of transient income, but not enough to really make a huge difference. As an example, there's no place to go in California, at least there wasn't at the time, where you could have early morning breakfast.
Sure.
That's one of my things for a community. You got to be able to go get breakfast.
That's very true because that's where community happens.
That's right.
In those little local spots. That's
The other one was Monongahela. And I've been doing cameras up there too. So I had access to the police and to the local council up there. And I go up there in all honesty and I said, what do you guys do and this different? Your community is vibrant. You have businesses all up and down your main street. You have activity all day long. You have, if you want to open up another business in Monongahela, you got to build it because there's no vacancies.
There's no vacancies.
There's no vacancies. It's just a thriving community. And they looked at me kind of funny and I said, what are you guys doing different? And he says, well, we didn't have the steel levers. And then they kind of thought and said, well, we did have chemical. We had all the supporting things that we got from the local steel industry that left. So they, they were kind of throwing out little odds and ends. And finally somebody says, I don't really know, but I do know that somebody many years ago charted a course and we just seemed to follow it. I said, bingo. You're not doing this fighting that goes along in all the other cities.
That's
that you have all
exactly
worked
right.
together to go somewhere and you've got something positive. That's not to say they don't have discourse and discussion.
Listen, Mary, you know as well as I do from being in business that disagreement is a good thing. Respectful disagreement is a good thing, right?
And they seem to have that to a big degree.
Right. And that's the difference between Monongahela and Donora and Charleroi and Monessen at that time was the disagreements in those other communities got personal and they became personal attacks. Whereas Monongahela, they disagreed, they talked it out, and they did they acted in the best interest of the community, right? That didn't happen in those other communities.
So anyway, as things go on, I made the decision that first off, if we're going to make a difference in Monessen, we can't look to the past.
Okay.
We got to look to the future.
True.
As long as we accept the position that we're in, we understand how we got here, but don't dwell on it. Understand how you got here. Let's move forward. Let's chart a path forward. To that end, we start every meeting with a prayer. We do that. In the course of running for the mayor, I did a lot of preliminary work trying to figure out exactly how we're going to do something with Monessen. I went and talked to Senator Kim Ward, to Senator Stefano, Representative DeVanzia. I talked to these people and I explained to them what I was seeing and what was going on. And they would get on the phone and they would call every place they could trying to find some money to help with Blythe.
Well, see, that's impressive in itself. And I have to tell you, because, in my day job, my career, I've been involved in these types of things, locally for a very long time. This is my 40th year in the business, right? But here's the thing. One of the things, and this is not an indictment against anybody, but because of the makeup, the geographic makeup of Westmoreland County, for example, okay? And it's the same thing for Charleroi over in Washington County. The Monongahela River is basically at, for lack of a better term, the bottom of 3 counties, right? So Westmoreland County, a lot of times, out of sight, out of mind, didn't extend all the way to the river. So Monessen, there was a little bit of a forgotten stepchild situation going on there. So that is a true thing. And that's nothing against, Senator Ward, because she started as a county commissioner in Westmoreland County, or any of the state reps, Rep DeVanzo and his predecessors, or even the county commissioners, right? It was just an out of sight, out of mind thing, right? So, when you have Ross Draver Township, who is between you and the county seat, okay? And Ross Draver is a successful community, right? It's a bedroom community largely, but it's a successful community. It's growing population-wise. It's one of the biggest communities in the valley. And it's natural that when you're coming from that county seat, coming westward, okay, you're gonna stop there, right? So you just don't go down over the hill to the river to see what's going on.
Well, that's very true. And there's probably a lot more to that than one might realize. But in the end, money is not typically out there for Blythe.
Right.
That is just something that people don't talk about in the federal government. Let's allocate some money for Blythe. It just doesn't exist.
Right.
And although they would burn up the phones, they offered very little encouragement that there was going to be anything to help me with Blythe.
Okay.
I went to the county commissioners and I talked to them numerous times. I presented a PowerPoint presentation to them. I talked about things that happened in Philadelphia with Blythe and some of the studies there, and it showed that Blythe has many effects on the population, much more than just being a blighted piece of property that doesn't pay the taxes.
It's more than an eyesore.
It affects arson, it affects crime, it affects mental health, a big thing on mental health. It affects the general philosophy and the things that people experience as they live in these neighborhoods. And the commissioners understood this. And they had the ARP money that had been given out by the federal government. And they
what does that stand for?
American Rescue Plan.
There you go.
Now, this money has had a lot of stipulations and requirements of how it can be spent. And Blythe was not one of the things on the list to do. But they go to their solicitor. Solicitor says, well, but American Rescue really is something to do with the welfare of the people. And because of the mental health and the drugs, the crime, and all the things that follow Blythe, maybe what we do is we say, let's take the bottom rung of the United States Census, the lowest economic category that they record, and say, we will address Blythe in those areas.
Okay.
Monessen is one of five third-class cities in Westmoreland County. Okay. And they went to those communities. We have two of these zones in the city of Monessen. Okay. So they came up with a plan they had already given money out to housing and to all the traditional things that ARP money can do, but they had about $10.4 million left over. They said, we will devote this to getting rid of Blythe in Westmoreland County. Okay. Now, it turns out that if you look at the map of where the Blythe is, Monessen has half the Blythe in all of Westmoreland County. You take all the Blythe in Westmoreland County, half of it's in Monessen. Half of it's in Monessen. So Monessen's a big target for the Westmoreland County commissioners. And I think that they truly are trying to improve things for the county.
Sure, I believe that.
So they've come in and started a program of doing removal of Blythe. Some of the very first buildings that occurred was the collapsed newspaper office on 6th Street. Okay. The old motel on 5th Street. Right. And those are gone. And they've since removed about 20 some odd residences around town, and they're doing it more and more as fast as they can get clearance to do it. They're moving forward with that process. So there's a lot of positive things that come up with that. That's become part of what we're doing. But by the same token, there's lots of other things going on in Monessen. Right. The sewer system is one of which that is aging.
No, it's antiquated, and most parts of it are 100 years old.
For many, many years, it has been kicked down the road of what we're going to do with this. Right. It's finally time to quit kicking this can and do something. So we entered into agreement with the United States USDA, along with Pinvest and some grants, and we've come up with a program of about $22 million to address the aging sewer system in Monessen. Is it going to fix all our problems? No.
Right.
But it is going to fix a majority of the problems. It's going to make it so that we don't have to worry about the line breaks quite so much as we do now. Lots of things are going on with that. We continued going down this path, and the first thing that comes to my mind is, okay, so the county's getting rid of housing. We're getting the sewer lines fixed up. So what we're going to have is a city with lots of vacant lots and a good sewer system. Just doesn't work.
Right.
We're missing something here. And lots of prayer. And one day I'm watching CBS Morning News, and they talk about a Nehemiah project of East Brooklyn. And it attracts my attention in ways you can't imagine. I immediately
I
go.
love this concept. Oh, this is wonderful.
I immediately reach out to all the pastors of all the churches in that same depressed area where we're removing the blighted property. And there's about 9 of them, 9 different churches. These are all small churches, but they are the community leaders in the areas in which their churches exist.
Absolutely.
I reached out to them and put together a presentation. We held a meeting here in this building where I presented a concept, a Nehemiah concept, to them. They adopted it. They said, this is a good idea. This is something that we need to do for our community.
It's awesome.
So we have a group of churches in Monessen that have all reached out to each other, that are working together to provide a function to help the community for which they serve.
Okay.
And I believe that will be a big part of the rebirth of Monessen, where they are the ones that serve on the board of directors that will end up being able to suggest and bring forth new housing for those that need it.
What better way to bring a community together
than the churches?
Right. That's the core. That's at the very heart and soul of the community. And those, and I've met several of those pastors, and look at this place where we're at right now in this little coffee shop. The investment of this church, Pastor Tim and his team, and how they've invested in Monessen and what they've done here shows you that this is where you start, because this and that's why the word community is in the name of this coffee shop. Could have called it his place. Didn't have to go any farther than that. Coffee, community, and more, and it has become exactly that. It's become a gathering place. It's a rallying point. I want to say a heartbeat of the entire city. It's a heartbeat here. You can feel it. You can feel the city coming to life here.
Well, as things have gone, this past year, I think, has worked out pretty well. We've accomplished a number of different things. They're all starting points for a much longer process. Monessen didn't become blighted overnight. It's going to take more than overnight to get it to come back to life. It's going to take several years. And the Nehemiah is something that was really designed as something that is bigger than me. Something that will last longer than me. My administration's for 3 more years. What happens then is up to the voters. But the bottom line is, I wanted something that would be much bigger than the administration. And that's what the Nehemiah project I hope to be. Along the same way, we've also accomplished other things at the same time. We finally got our agreement with the local union. That's a very positive thing. I'm very excited to.
It's a big deal.
That's a big deal, that the union's a part of what keeps us alive.
Well, a city is much, much more than a mayor and council, right?
Absolutely.
There's a lot of moving parts and a lot of people and effort and man hours that go into running a city. Even, this is not a huge city by any stretch, but there's a lot that goes into running a community.
Yes. The other thing that's kind of important to the well-going of the city is the way that you run your finances. And this year, we've been very tight with the money, but we're living within the means. And that's an important concept that you really got to adhere to if you're going to make any progress in the world. By the same token, we get tax money once a year. The real estate taxes go out in end of February, March, April, May, money starts coming back in. But there is a winter period where money's not there, and it's very tight.
Sure.
There's something called a tax anticipation note. It's like a payday loan for a business.
Sure.
It's not necessarily a true loan because your employer really controls it. Well, this isn't a true loan either because it's tied to the taxes.
Sure.
So I went to several different banks, but it was CFS Bank in Charleroi that
Okay.
really even understood what a tan note meant. When I brought that up to Community Bank, they didn't even understand that concept behind
Right.
it. But CFS Bank has committed to a tan note, and in fact,
Okay.
and Thursday night we will adopt that, and we're off to the races for the next coming year that we've
Excellent.
got that accomplished. But it also leads me to think, and I know this isn't political or anything, but we have an election next year. And I urge people to pay attention to this election and do what your heart tells you to do. That we today, for the last year, we've enjoyed a very positive city council, that
Right.
we've been able to work together and to do this. And I hope that we find somebody that wants to join our team, as there's one person who says he's not going to run again.
Okay.
Councilman Greger has indicated he's not going to run again. So we need somebody to step up to the bat.
Sure.
And you know, it's rather interesting to me. I like history, although I don't want to dwell on it. I like history. I enjoy history. President John Adams was our second president. His son became the sixth president.
Okay.
But think about how that transpired and what his father might have told his son. And there's a quote that really comes to be. He says, "Public business, my son, must always be done by somebody. It will be done by somebody or other. If wise men decline it, others will not. If honest men refuse it, others will not." Well, his son understood what he was saying and said, "Well, I'm going to run again." And he stepped up to the bat and he ran.
Okay.
Well, I know there's people in Monessen that feel the same way. They believe
Sure.
and they believe in the city and they want to see the best. Go to the county, put your name on the list.
Put
Go
your
out
name
and
on a ballot. That's the ultimate way to serve your community. And,
absolutely.
you know, growing up in Charleroi, one thing I will tell you, you know, Charleroi, Monessen, Denora, Monongahela, California, all of them. Monessen natives, Monessen residents are not even arguably the most passionately loyal citizens that I've ever met. And I've been doing municipal consulting in hundreds of communities around the state and around the country. I have never seen a community where the residents are more passionately loyal to that community. And that's one thing that Monessen has that sets it apart from its surrounding, but from its neighbors, right? The people, you look at the people who have sat in your chair previous to you, okay? Mayor Sharaw, Mayor Mavarikis, Mayor Smith, all three dramatically different individuals, different from you, different from each other. But one thing that ties everything together is that passionate loyalty, that love of the city of Monessen. That's one thing you cannot deny any one of those three individuals or yourself. And I think what I like about it, from your perspective, you're not a native. You weren't born and raised here, right? But you still see the potential and feel that passion for the city.
Oh, absolutely.
And that, my friend, speaks volumes about character. And I think that is why you've been able to move certain situations forward where others have not been able to, where they ran into certain kind of roadblocks. But even what you said about I've attended Monessen City Council meetings in the past, and they weren't like they are now. So that is a dramatic change just within itself. You know, you getting back to what you had said about disagreement, okay? Again, disagreement is a wonderful thing. If we all thought the same, looked the same, talked the same, the world would be a very boring place and nothing would get done.
Exactly.
Nothing would get done. But there's a difference between disagreeing and flat out fighting.
Right.
Right?
Right.
Fighting gets you nowhere.
Absolutely.
Okay? Disagreement leads to conversation, which leads to collaboration. Right? Fighting just creates discord. It's not the way to do it.
And that's what I'm really trying to get across, is that we need people that share this common vision of Monessen being something that is common to be. To that end, we're going to have a Monessen Summit, Monessen Economic Summit,
Okay.
on January the 20th. It'll be held at the high school off of State Road.
Up on okay.
This economic summit is more than just a time to get up there and talk about what we're trying to do. I brought in all the leaders of this area that we can possibly think about. As an example, we will have a message from the governor.
Okay.
Now, he's going through his inauguration on the 17th. He himself won't be there, nor will Austin Davis. But they will have somebody.
And the
present.
lieutenant governor, by the way, has Monessen ties.
Oh, yes, absolutely. Especially the Austin Davis.
Right.
So anyway, we're going to start with something from the governor's office.
Okay.
We're going to have a keynote speaker by the name of Dr. Andrew Johnson. This guy is a very dynamic person.
Excellent young man. I know him well.
He is a PhD, and he's well deserved. He is very,
Yes.
very, very intelligent. He gives a very dynamic presentation. But more than anything, he also happens to be involved with the Forbes Fund. In fact, I believe he's the chairman of that.
Yes.
So, it's rather interesting. He came to me very early in on my administration as being mayor, and he said, "Ron, I want to do something for Monessen."
Isn't he from here?
He was born here, or at least
born
he spent his early years here
Yeah,
for sure.
Yeah.
But he says, I want to do something for Monessen. I want to make it the model city for the entire Mon Valley. In other words, he's not interested in just Monessen, but the entire Mon Valley.
Right.
His scope is much bigger than what the problems we have here. But he says, you got to show me something. Well, hopefully he's starting to see that we are doing something, because, well, he's going to be our keynote speaker. And I'm looking forward to that. I'm going to have somebody from Gary Rethenschaler's office here.
Okay.
I'm going to have somebody from Kim Ward's office, Senator Ward. Somebody from Congressman Devanzia. So we're going to have some state representation here, some federal and state representation that means something to Monessen.
Sure.
By the same token, I'm going to have the county commissioners here. These are the people that we really need to say thank you to that are helping us with our Blythe problem.
Well, and I think government happens the way government was intended to happen at the county level. Okay, once you get to the state level and then the federal level, it becomes diluted to a certain extent and becomes, more geared toward business than the people. But the local level where you're sitting and the county level is real government for the people, of the people, by the people, the whole thing. So I love the fact that you're going to have them there. And I know Representative Devanzo, Senator Ward. Senator Ward, the fact that you've engaged her, okay? This is the highest ranking person in the Pennsylvania State Senate. That's a huge deal. The fact that she's one of us, she's from here, but she's engaged in Monessen. That's huge. That is huge, because that didn't happen before.
The history of Monessen is much bigger than the time that I've been in Monessen. As
Absolutely.
I understand it, Monessen has had some very respectable people, Mandarino, and so forth.
Absolutely.
That really
Hugo
had
Perenni, Jim Mandarino. The
Exactly.
list. It's a long list.
It's a long list of people that have really dominated not only the county, but even all through to the state in the past. Well, over the course of time, things have shifted a lot. And for the last 15 years or so, maybe more, maybe less, Monessen seemed to be the outcast of everything. It's the outcast of Westmoreland County, the outcast of the city.
I think that's an accurate assessment. Yeah.
I think that we have actually got back on the radar now, that we have shown that we have some aspirations, we're doing some neat things, and this economic summit is going to be our opportunity to share that information with all of Monessen.
Okay.
And I invite anybody and
And this is
everybody.
open to the public.
This is open to the
And
public.
it's free.
Well, you go get your tickets and you enter in Nehemiah as the discount code, it becomes free.
There you go.
So,
Well, and that's wonderful, and this is kind of a follow up to a day that the city spent a lot of the leaders and even citizens at Carnegie Mellon University a few months ago, and also with the Allegheny Conference for an economic development and those types of things. Can you touch a little bit on that? I know it got some publicity in the local paper, but I'm not sure people really know the depth of what went on that day. And what were your kind of describe it, but then what were your key takeaways from that encouraged you to keep moving forward?
Well, I think that was really part of the steps that it took to get us to where we're going right now.
Okay.
That we got on a bus and we assembled a group of local people in town. Some were community leaders, some were just general public, some were just a very diverse group. Mm-hmm. So we hop on a bus and we talked about some of the visions that we all shared, and we show up at CMU Distressed Communities group.
Okay.
And they give a presentation about what it means to be a community that's lost half their population in a short period of time. And Monessen's not alone in that realm.
Absolutely.
It's happened many times, many different places. Mm-hmm. And they've done quite a bit of study on that. But the takeaway from that whole thing was follow the money.
Okay.
That was what I got out of that part of the thing, was they had to find the money and follow the money. And they followed the money. Then we went to the Allegheny committee. What was
Allegheny Conference?
Allegheny Conference. And that was very interesting because they had a lot of the people that really controlled what Pittsburgh came to be. Mm-hmm. These are the sources of the money, so forth.
Sure.
And the takeaway from that was find the source for the money. Then we went to East Liberty. East Liberty.
East Liberty.
East
Sure.
Liberty. Met with the East Liberty Community Development Group. Mm-hmm. East Liberty went through a process long before steel left the United States. It turned out that it was the automobile, the invention of the automobile that drove that community to almost near extinction.
Right. Right.
You had a city that was built upon people that were pedestrians, and when you introduced the automobile, they didn't know how to respond to it. They built freeways and roads around town, and they basically ignored the population. Mm-hmm. And it suffered immensely. The East Liberty CDC today has accomplished lots of things. Mm-hmm. The way they got there is probably very unique and probably very difficult to repeat. In fact, to some degree, it appeared to me that if they'd throw it up against the wall, if it fell off, they'd throw something different at the wall.
Yeah. Until
it stuck. And if it stuck, they'd start throwing more stuff that stuck.
Sure.
And that seemed to be their philosophy, that they made it, they finally survived it through the closest thing to a Ponzi scheme you can possibly have. They were leveraging themselves. They would get a little bit of money here. They'd take that money. They'd use it as collateral to borrow more money. They'd take that borrowed money. They'd leverage it to go borrow bigger money. And they just kept doing that over and over again until they had enough money that they could make an impact to the community.
Okay.
And they did. They turned it around. Today, East Liberty is a wildly different community than it was just a few years ago.
Absolutely.
They've made a huge impact. Mm-hmm. The takeaway from that whole conference was, to me, at least on the East Liberty side, was he who owns the land controls the future.
Okay.
That it was because they owned the land that they were able to accomplish some of the things that they were trying to do. Monessen has its own future going. We have our own ways of doing things. We're relying upon the county for demolition. In the course of that, they will also have their land bank that's going to own a lot of the property.
Okay.
That doesn't necessarily mean that we don't have any say-so in how that property is used.
Right.
But it does allow for a way to develop going forward. Mm-hmm. So this economic summit is really not the end of that process, but another stepping stone along the way of what we need to do to get this city turned around.
So is it fair to say that from the perspective of the general public, if I'm a Monessen resident and I want to get a look at the blueprint that the city is following, will that be something that I will see? Will that be explained to me as to what the thought process and kind of what our conversation has just been today? Will you be sharing kind of that blueprint? Because I know you have a vision and you've shared the vision with council and with countless others, but to get the message out and get that vision in front of the general public.
That is my goal, and I will do everything I possibly can. You know, the one thing that you have to be careful about is change is something that a lot of people are very skeptical of.
Oh yeah.
Change is a scary thing.
Human nature guides us to be afraid of change.
Right. My general philosophy is change is good.
Mm-hmm.
In the midst of mass confusion, there always exists opportunity.
Absolutely.
And that's just something that I hope that Monessen can understand.
Mm-hmm.
So far, this last couple of months has been a test of that with the citizens. The county comes in and they demo the newspaper office and the Fifth Street Hotel.
Mm-hmm.
Concurrent to that, the gas company comes in and starts laying new gas lines down Schoonmaker and Donner. Things were happening. Things were treacherous. You couldn't even drive down the street.
It was
without,
tough. It was tough. Yeah, 'cause
it was tough.
Absolutely.
There's one of two things could have happened. I could have got slapped in the face and said, "You got to stop this. This is crazy what you're trying to do."
Yeah.
But what I got in return was things are finally starting to happen.
Right.
We're starting to see something going on here. And I hope that we just continue to build upon that.
And I think that the public sees that, and I think that even people outside of Monessen see it. You know, when I look at Monessen, I always saw Douglas Education Center, right? My good friend Jeff in Brescia, I've always been impressed with what Jeff has done with that organization in the community, right? Jeff has stayed loyal to this community, even when it was like people were pulling on him and saying, "Why are you in Monessen? Get out of there. Go build a campus someplace. Get out. Why are you in that city?" Right? But Jeff stayed loyal to this community. And he's one of those businessmen that did that. Another one is George Podiakis, right?
Yes.
With his restaurant, it's a bold decision to open a restaurant in a city like Monessen, right? But there it is by George, and they're thriving. They've moved into a new building, a bigger building. They're thriving, and other restaurants are opening and following suit. Again, this place here. So while it's a bold investment and a bold choice to invest in a city like Monessen, that's becoming less and less so because there's been those few people like Jeff, like George, who have led the way, right? And shown you can succeed here. You can have a successful small business in a city like Monessen. That's, to me, that is, those folks are critically important. They're just gems in the crown of Monessen, right? Wherever you go, those people are. We just need to just thank them, and I don't know that thank you's enough, right?
Exactly. Well, it's rather interesting because already we're starting to see some vacant lots pop up. The Fifth and Donner corner is a big piece of property.
Sure.
In the coming couple of weeks, we're going to see more demolition on that same block. The point being is demolition is not the end of all ends.
Right.
We need to have some imagination. We need to have investors. Investment starts through imagination. And you think about that for just a second. What could you possibly do on that corner? Well, there's several things that come to mind. First off, 2 years ago, we had 3 different companies come in and do videos in Monessen. We had Showtime, we had Netflix, we had Amazon, all come in and do a production that was based on Monessen. But what do? They come in and do their film, they pack everything up in their trucks, and they go to Pittsburgh where there's a studio. Well, we have Douglas College here that does this. Maybe we need to support that and build a big studio there that they could
They
actually...
have a tremendous studio.
That's right.
And they have a film school.
That's right.
Okay,
They're into this. This
absolutely
is down their alley. Maybe we build a studio over there where these production companies could come and do things.
Yep.
There's also a different model. Maybe what we do is Douglas College has lots of students. Their student housing scattered all over town. Maybe what we do is we consolidate that. We put dorms there, and maybe we put them upstairs, and we have retail space downstairs, so we can support a thriving retail group. That's another possibility.
Okay.
But think about this. At one time, that was a health center, Health Mart.
Right.
Maybe what we ought to be doing is getting together with UPMC, AHC, or one of the other big organizations and encourage them to come open up a little health center here where we have an aging population. We're the center of a thriving area. And you take in all the communities within 5 miles here, there's a substantial population.
Sure.
The point being is I can see where that would work. By the same token, where the hotel it used to be, maybe a modern hotel needs to be there. The point being is, it is fabric that can be made into anything.
It's a blank canvas.
It's exactly right.
It's a blank canvas.
It's something that can be developed and move forward with. What we got to do is decide as a community what we want to see there, and then we need to find the people to invest in that community, to solicit.
Well, that's the key. And what I've seen from you and your administration, your council, nobody associated with the city now is shy about making that ask, right? And what's the old adage? If you don't ask, the answer is always going to be no.
That's right.
And what's the worst thing that Pennsylvania can say to you? So if you go to DCED and look for investment and they say, nope, we can't do it. Okay, fine. Then you go to somebody else. That doesn't mean that at some point they won't. It just means that right at that moment, maybe they can't do it. But if you don't ask, the answer is always no.
Yep. You're right. And as a matter of fact, I was in a meeting by a nonprofit, Matt Urim, who's based out of Washington, PA.
Sure, know him well. Good
Matt
man.
Urim has plans for doing some development in Monessen, and he starts in having these meetings, and his meetings kept getting larger and larger. And late last year, I went to a meeting that had a gentleman in it that happened to be, his name was Little, I do believe. He sits on a board, an authority that sits between Congress in Washington, D.C. and HUD. And when Congress says, here's a few $1 trillion that needs to go to HUD, he's one of the people that sits on the authority and says, okay, we're going to use some for housing, some for rental, some for this, some for that, infrastructure, whatever. Big bucks. And he describes this to me as huge companies come in and just grab these huge swaths of money to go and do their things. But in the course of things, I give this guy a tour of Monessen, and we drive through some of the more distressed communities, and we end up at the old Linden Park. And Matt Urim is there talking about how he can build some small homes here for the elderly people. And the whole time he's giving his presentation, this Mr. Little was, attention was somewhere. He was looking all around. He taps me on the shoulder and he says, Ron, you see that house over there? It's blighted. The house over there is blighted. The one over here is blighted. They need to go. But the house over here has got somebody living in it. We got to figure out a way to support that guy, to get him up to, give him the job.
That's exactly right.
Give him the ability.
How do we support that?
How do we support that? The point being is it was very enlightening to me that first off, this guy comes to town. He looks around. He's not interested in the development by Matt Urim. He wants to change the whole community. He wants to look, as far as the eye can see, he's imagining something in the future.
And again, he's a visionary. He's a big picture guy, and in his role, that's what he has to do. And, you should never discount the Matt Urims out there because, Matt...
He's the one that got him into town, first off.
That's exactly right. So, and it should be noted that Matt is working with local folks. Bernie Sarah, Bernie, there's nobody more Monessen than Bernie.
Right.
He's as Monessen as it gets. Good friend of mine, and I love him to death. And he's working hard to give back and to do something good with the community. And he's brought Matt Urim in, who has a plan and resources and so on. But to your point about investment, We've been working, Nick's mom, Diane, who I work with in my day job, Diane Altland, who's a visionary engineer and a very, very dear friend of mine. We've been exposed to opportunities with organizations, companies like Goldman Sachs, for example. Goldman Sachs has a municipal investment arm, okay? And we've met the gentleman that runs that. Goldman, there's study money available. There's funding available to do a study of the city, the entire city, its infrastructure, its demographics, and everything that comes out of the IIJA. So that money's out there, and then you get that study done, and you take that study and you go sit down with a Goldman Sachs, okay? They will then come and they will invest in your community. They'll buy into that vision and they will invest in that community. And Goldman Sachs is just one of many. There are other organizations out there that do that. But what you're doing and having that study done and the infrastructure, and it goes to any place where you're going to go and you're going to ask for funding for something. You can't go there with an empty hand. You can't go with an open hand, right? You've got to have value. We've dug in and we've done the heavy lifting here. We see the value that we bring, okay? And boom, here we go. Here's what we think. What do you think?
First off, as a result of my discussion with Mark Little, I reached out to HUD in Pittsburgh. And Michael Horvath is the area director for HUD.
Sure.
He informs us that there's a program called Distressed Communities Technical Assistance. So HUD is, and in fact, this afternoon we will have our first introduction to 2 different individuals that have been financed by HUD that will be offered to the city as technical advisors. They are from HUD. They have access to the HUD finances, the grants and all that goes on there. So I'm looking forward to that.
And they're here as advisors at no cost to the city. That's not coming out of the city's budget.
This is HUD money. That's
HUD money.
It's HUD money that's
and
doing
that's
it.
an important distinction.
Yes. And by the same token, we have DCED that's doing something we call the STAMP program. That's for distressed communities.
Right. You should call it Act 48, Act 47.
Act 47.
Act 47.
Exactly. And we're not going to go Act 47, but part of what the DCED does is try to make these communities more prosperous. And,
it's all part of that planning.
And they are in the process of establishing some advisors from that aspect that will be funded through DCED. So we got all these advisors coming. The Economic Summit. Think of that, the Economic Summit. That's when the opportunity is for all of Monessen to come together and say, yes, this is something we want to see going forward. Yes, we want to be a part of it. Tell us more about how this works. And that's what I hope to get across.
Well, I think it gets no better than that. And I would hope that, anybody that sees this, and again, we will put this, we're going to publish this conversation on Monday, this coming Monday. It'll be posted on all of our channels, visually on YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, all of that at 6 a.m. Monday morning. And we will share it across all of our social media. You do the same, the city. And once you get that out there, hopefully we'll get the attention of the community, of the residents, and they will come and listen and learn, because there's a role here for everyone.
Absolutely.
There's a role for everyone, and this is not exclusive. This is not just you and council or and the pastors or anybody. This is all hands on deck.
Absolutely.
I think that's wonderful. Mayor, listen, I applaud what you're doing. I've been paying attention. Of course, we need to give a shout out to my buddy Mike Korposh, who's been working hand in hand with you, and I believe is moving forward in his role as city administrator. And when the opportunity came up, and I was asked by the city about Mike, I could not think of a better person to come in and work with you and that council. Mike's as good as they come, and
absolutely,
and he's experienced, and I've seen you guys how you work together, and as far as Nick and I and us, and again, we support you 100% because we're all about. We live in the valley. I grew up in Charleroi, and I live over in Belle Vernon now, and Nick lives in Monongahela. So we're invested here. We're invested here, and we want to see everybody succeed. And I think that, again, that quote, okay, the rising tide raises all ships. You're the tide, my friend. You make it happen.
I thank you for allowing me to be here.
Thank you for being here. Appreciate it, sir. Thank you very much.
Thank you.